Okay, welcome back to the RDI Hub. This is Kerry MacConnell, and today we're interviewing Barry O'Sullivan, GM Commercial Fexco Pace. Barry's just after doing a presentation for us in the collab space here in the Hub. And I'm intrigued because the opening slide of his presentation stated, I am most definitely not a sales guy, but I've sold a lot of stuff. So we're going to dig a bit deeper into that. Barry, you are very welcome today, so thank you for joining us. Your presentation was highly engaging and our members definitely got a lot out of it. The topic, you don't close a sale until you open a relationship, it definitely had good insights for our members when they're selling their products or services. So talk to me about not being a sales guy, but selling a lot of stuff. Tell us more about that approach.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry, and great to be here in the RDI. Look, throughout my life, I've done different types of selling, but throughout my career, my experience now is that I think that building a relationship is much more important than the individual sale. And most certainly, if you want what I would consider to be sustainable sales, you have to open a relationship with either the company or the person that you're engaged with. And I think most people will find it extraordinarily rewarding if you start to adopt that habit, because you get to a situation eventually where your customers are kind of blurred as your friends. You know who they are, you know the life they live, you can see a whole different side of them. And I certainly have found it very rewarding over the years to have pursued a type of an approach to selling, but I have an aversion almost to that kind of forced selling where you target somebody and you just literally throw a product or service at them, whether or not they like it or not. I have an aversion to that, and I much prefer to be a bit more patient, understand the customer, understand their need and the problem that they're trying to solve, if indeed they have a problem, and then try to weave the service or product or service that we have to suit their need.
Well, that's interesting because you've worn a lot of different hats in your time. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your background from selling stuff on Market Lane in Killarney through to working to Coca-Cola and other global companies?
Yeah. So I was born and reared in Killarney, went to school in St. Brendan's in college in Killarney, and then on to Trinity in Dublin. And when I finished in college, I think to the surprise of my parents, I didn't really want to get a 9-to-5 job. So, and this is back in the late 80s, or early 80s. And I started selling. I opened a stall in Killarney, one of the first to do so, selling trinkets literally to the tourists in Killarney. And surprisingly, it was quite a profitable venture over a couple of years. I used to also work in the Laurels pub at night, which is right beside Market Lane in Killarney. And had a fantastic time with the O'Leary family there. And one day on the street, I was approached by somebody from senior management of Fexco who were expanding their team here in Killorglin and asked me if I would apply my trade to helping them to sell their services on the international stage. And I did. And I joined for a short time, but managed to stay for quite an extensive period of time. And I'm still here today.
And the rest is history, as they say. The presentation that you gave, trust, came across as vital. I mean, you put the word trust in so many times. How do you define and prioritize key elements in building client relationships? Because trust takes time. So how do you go about building trust with your clients?
I think the first step in that trust process is to learn to keep your mouth shut more than anything else, and to let the person you're talking to, let them talk and let them explain what problem or what their life is. And even don't worry too much about the problem at the moment. Just, if you ask most people, after a meeting, do you really know the person you're talking to? Do you know the life they have? Do you know who they are? Do you know what gets them up in the morning? What's their biggest challenge? What's their pain point? Maybe they have something going on in their life that's a problem or not a problem, or is it fantastic for them. But you've got to find a way slowly. You won't get in the first meeting, but you got to find a way to understand who they are, what values they have, what it is they really, really need. And And then you've got to determine whether or not you can help them with that need. And if you can't help them with that need, you should be very honest and authentic to yourself and tell them that you can't help them with it. And maybe you can help them find the right solution, but that's my passionate belief that you have to understand the problem that the prospect customer has. And if you can solve it, fantastic. It's a win-win. If you can't, then you've got to be honest and say you can't. There's no point doing what I would consider to be a false sale, because a false sale will eventually not lead to anything, and you're just really wasting your own time and their time.
So it sounds like brand and reputation is really important to you.
Yes. I was lucky enough in my life, during my life, to have different periods of working with companies like Coca-Cola. Spent 4 years with Coca-Cola working in Eastern Europe and Russia. I worked with companies like Western Union, big financial brand, First Data in America, as well as MasterCard in New York. And I think they did teach me a lot in terms of brand values. But probably the place I suppose I learned it most was in my early years in Fexco, when the McCarthy family, and in particular Brian, was expanding the business. His absolute kind of philosophy was to get to know each and every one of our customers and got to know what it is they needed. And in those days, we didn't really have a lot to sell. We went off and built what they needed, if you understand. It's slightly different. And Brian was always I suppose we were young at the time, but always trying to give us guidance in terms of understand what they need and then bring it back and let's see if we can solve it.
Again, the interpersonal relationships and bringing your authentic self. And as you said in the presentation, you've got one mouth and two ears.
Correct. Use them in that order.
Yeah. I suppose I just want to explore a bit more about relationships and relationships playing like a crucial role in successful sales. Can you give me an example of, where it was that personal relationship or that connection, that empathy and understanding people's pain points that actually kind of got you over the line on a successful project?
Yeah, well, I suppose in the recent enough past, Fexco has chased a new business in the cruise industry, and over the years, we were a new entrant into that market, and it was difficult enough to get the relationships going. But eventually we used, I suppose, our Irish, a lot of the customers are American, and we used our Irish-American, I suppose, DNA. It helped a lot, and we managed to convince some of them to come to Ireland to visit us here in Ireland. And over a period of a week, and several times they came eventually, to spend a lot of time with them here, get to know them on a personal level, brought them to visit different parts of Kerry, brought them to my house, got to meet my family, and that translates into a real personal relationship when it goes back, if you know what I mean, to a normal day-to-day scenario. And that helped enormously to grow from one customer to about 3 or 4 customers. That same people that came ended up introducing us to several other people, because I suppose they had come and seen where we were from. They had seen what we were at. They had seen us at a personal level. They'd seen the team here on the ground in Kerry, and that meant a lot in bridging that trust. And yeah, I would firmly believe that makes the difference. So you've got to find a way to invite your customers into your life, and likewise they might reciprocate and invite them into yours. If you manage, that's kind of holy grail stuff in terms of relationship management. But if you manage to achieve it, then not alone will you have a successful business, but you'll have grown an incredible friendship and network.
That's amazing. That's taking it to the next level. But that's really impressive. There's something else you mentioned in your presentation which really fascinated me. When you're talking about building a relationship with a company, you don't just build a relationship with one person. You were saying that the magic number is 5 different people from different teams. Can you tell me more about that approach when you're trying to dig down to understand a customer's pain points?
Yeah, well, in the larger companies, not the smaller, but the larger companies, in what would typically be described as an enterprise sale, there isn't one decision maker. There's usually I won't say a task force, but a kind of a steering committee usually involved in those scenarios. So you must understand the decision-making process from the outset. But usually it takes the form of, and certainly because Fexco is involved in payments, we would typically see a scenario where we would interact immediately with the commercial heads, and so they would bring us in. We'd get a high-level assessment that maybe we're in play to win the business. We get to know that team. But at the same time and in parallel, we don't wait for the business to introduce us. We're actively working on understanding the IT people, the security people, the finance people is very important. And we would definitely go out of our way to try and make sure we have prior introductions, if you understand, and we would use whatever network, even the business people, while the process is going on, to get a side conversation with them, just to say who we are, what we are, blah, blah, blah. And that's, but we would definitely target about 5 key decision makers across a large organization. Because without that, what will happen is at the end of the process, it goes forward for a decision to some meeting, and you've got to visualize what that looks like. And if it's just one person in that room saying, hey, we've got an opportunity here with this XYZ company, but there's 4 other competing voices in that room, you're not going to win, you know. Whereas, and often it's not even that you're asking the other people to get behind your bid, it's to make sure that nobody will go against the company and say, well, look, are we sure about this company? The minute somebody says, are you sure about this company? You're no longer in play.
One other question. Trust is coming across so strongly in everything that you're talking about here. I suppose I have to ask the question, have you ever come across, say, a challenging situation where trust was compromised, and how did you successfully navigate and rebuild it? Without naming any names.
No, without naming any names. Yeah, and look, I have probably one of the best examples in my career in that we had quite a major customer of ours many years ago, thankfully. But let's say that our service didn't deliver, and it was a large retail merchant, and we had control of the payment points of payment, and it went offline for a certain amount of time, and I think for about two days. So that this retail merchant couldn't take payments for 2 days, and it caused them a lot of issues, and we didn't resolve them in the time that we should have. And so I got a call from the CEO, who left me in no doubt what he thought of our service, which was a fair comment. And my immediate reaction when I put down the phone was to get in my car and fly to it was in a different country. I drove to Cork, got a flight, and arrived in his door the following morning. And all I had to do was to say that we were sorry, that we owned up to the issue, and it was our fault, and it was, that we had no excuse whatsoever. And believe it or not, he thanked me for coming in person to say that, and we still have that business today.
That's amazing. That is amazing. That's a great story. I suppose I'll have to ask, beyond revenue, how do you measure the success of your relationship sales efforts?
Yeah, I know it's not very popular to say, but I don't really look too much at revenue myself. I much prefer to look at the life cycle or the lifetime revenue of a customer. Thankfully, most of the customers that we signed, and still some of the customers that I would have signed in the early days of Fexco, are still with us today, right? And I joined Fexco in 1989, so the fact that we still have some of those customers today bears testimony that you don't look at the immediate revenue today. If you look at over, if I was to ask people again, when you look at it, and if you focus slightly differently and said, well, if I was to keep this customer for 20, 30 years, now what's the revenue look like?
Yeah.
Now, how would you change your approach to that customer versus we have, I think, fallen into a trap of looking at the revenue on a year-by-year basis. And I believe that changes or influences our decision-making with in our approach to business today. Now, that's only with hindsight. At the time, we didn't know that they would stay with us that long. But if I'm trying to apply some of the experience of my career, I would be saying that much more focus on building a strong foundation with that relationship is likely to lead to the situation of customers being with you for 20 or 30 years. And that's a game changer for revenue.
It really is. And that leads nicely into my last question, which is, what would be the one most important lesson you've learned over your career? Again, probably not the most obvious question for me, or the most obvious answer for me, but I think I'm very clear in it, and that the most important is having strong family, friends, relationships, network, whatever you want to call it, and including some very strong customer friends as well over the years, but really having a strong family network, because look, careers change. We all change careers in our life. We jump around. We do different things. So in my world, careers come and go in that respect. You have ups and downs. But when you've ups, you like to share them with family. When you've downs, they're there to pull you up. So my career looking back, my strongest recommendation to anyone would be, focus very strongly on keeping strong family, friends, connection. Never lose sight of that. Barry, it has been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you for another 3 or 4 hours, but you have a job to do. We both do.
Thank you.
Thank you
Kerry.
so much. I've really enjoyed it.